The Starship Horizon had been on a simple mission. Commander Jake Morrison and his crew were supposed to meet with the Varelian Empire and discuss trade agreements. Earth needed allies in the galaxy, and the Varelians controlled important trade routes. Everything was going well until at WAs and single quotes T. 3 days into the negotiations, Varelian soldiers stormed the meeting room. They arrested Jake and accused the entire Earth delegation of spying. Jake tried to explain that it was a mistake, but the Varelians did not listen. They dragged him before their High Council while his crew watched helplessly from behind. Energy barriers. The High Counselor was a frightening creature. He stood over 9 feet tall, with black scales covering his entire body. 4 muscular arms hung from his shoulders, and his eyes glowed a deep red. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the massive chamber like thunder. "Human," the High Counselor said, looking down at Jake with disgust. "Your people have been caught gathering information about our military defenses. This is an act of war." Jake shook his head. "We didn't spy on anyone. There must be some misunderstanding. We came here in peace." The Varelians in the chamber laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Their laughter was sharp and clicking, like insects chattering in the dark. "All criminals claim innocence," the High Counselor replied. "But we have evidence. Your guilt is clear to us." Jake felt his heart sink. He knew there was no evidence because his crew had done nothing wrong. Someone had set them up. But how could he prove his innocence to aliens who had already decided he was guilty? Then the High Counselor raised one of his 4 hands, and the chamber fell silent. "However," he continued, "the Varelian Empire believes in ancient justice. You may prove your innocence through the trial of crushing." Jake did not like the sound of that. "What is the trial of crushing?" A Varelian official stepped forward to explain. The trial of crushing was an ancient ritual that dated back thousands of years. When someone claimed to be innocent, they could face 3 of the Empire's elite guards in combat. If they survived all 3 trials, they would be declared innocent. If they fell, their guilt would be confirmed, and their entire crew would be executed. Jake looked up at the observation deck where his crew stood watching. Lieutenant Commander Hannah Price had her hands pressed against the glass. She was a brilliant officer and a good friend. Behind her stood Chief Engineer Danny Cole, a young man barely 25 years old, who had joined the crew just 6 months ago. There were 37 other crew members up there, all depending on him. "I accept," Jake said. The crowd of Varelians murmured in surprise. They had expected the human to beg for mercy, not agree to face their best warriors. The High Counselor leaned forward with interest. "You understand what you are agreeing to?" he asked. "Our Corsith Guards are the finest warriors in the galaxy. They have crushed beings far stronger than humans. Your species is known for being soft and weak." Jake straightened his back despite the fear growing in his chest. "I understand. When do we start?" The High Counselor smiled, revealing rows of sharp black teeth. Immediately, guards led Jake through winding corridors until they reached the arena. It was a circular space about 100 feet across, with walls made of some kind of crystal that hummed with energy. The floor was smooth and cold beneath his boots. Above him, thousands of Varelians filled the viewing stands, eager to watch the spectacle. They took his jacket and his boots, leaving him in just his uniform pants and undershirt. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but his bare hands and whatever strength he could find within himself. Hannah's voice came through a speaker somewhere above. "Jake, you don't have to do this. There has to be another way." He looked up at the observation deck where his crew had been moved. They were closer now, only about 20 feet above the arena floor. He could see the fear in Hannah's eyes and the worry on Danny's young face. "There's no other way," Jake called back. "But don't worry. I've survived worse." That was a lie. He had never survived anything like this. But his crew needed to believe in him, even if he wasn't sure he believed in himself. A massive door on the far side of the arena began to open. The crowd grew excited, their clicking laughter filling the air. Jake took a deep breath and tried to remember his training. He had been a soldier before becoming a starship commander. He knew how to fight, but he also knew that he was about to face something far beyond any enemy he had ever encountered. The first guard stepped into the arena, and Jake felt his confidence waver. Vorath was enormous. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, with shoulders as wide as a doorway. His skin was covered in natural armor plates that looked harder than steel. 4 arms hung at his sides, each one ending in claws that could tear through metal. His eyes were small and cruel, and when he looked at Jake, there was no mercy in them. "This is the human?" Vorath laughed, and the sound was like rocks grinding together. "I have crushed beings twice his size. This will not even be entertaining." The High Counselor's voice boomed through the arena. "The first trial begins now. Vorath, you may proceed." Jake raised his fists and spread his feet into a fighting stance. His heart was pounding so hard, he could feel it in his throat. Sweat dripped down his forehead despite the cold air. Vorath moved forward slowly, savoring the moment. He wanted to enjoy this. He wanted to make the human suffer before breaking him completely. "Your species is pathetic," Vorath said. "Soft skin. Weak bones. You cannot even survive in your own planet's oceans or mountains without special equipment. How did creatures like you ever leave your world?" Jake did not answer. He was watching the guards' movements, looking for patterns, trying to find any advantage he could use. Vorath's first attack came without warning. One moment he was walking slowly, and the next moment his massive fist was flying toward Jake's head. Jake dove to the side, feeling the rush of air as the blow missed him by inches. The guard's fist hit the crystal wall behind him, leaving a crack in the supposedly unbreakable material. Jake realized something important in that moment. He could not win this fight through strength. He could not defeat Vorath in direct combat. The only way to survive was to endure. He had to take whatever punishment the guard delivered and keep getting up until the trial was over. Thought it was going to be the longest night of his life. Vorath attacked again, and this time Jake was not fast enough to dodge. The guard's lower right arm caught him across the chest, sending him flying backward. Jake hit the ground hard, sliding across the smooth floor until he crashed into the far wall. Pain exploded through his body. It felt like being hit by a truck dot. The Varelian crowd cheered and clicked with excitement. This was what they had come to see. They wanted to watch the soft human get crushed. Jake pushed himself up onto his hands and knees. His chest was already bruising and breathing hurt, but he forced himself to stand anyway. He would not give them the satisfaction of staying down. Vorath looked surprised. He got up. That is unexpected. Most beings stay down after the first real hit. Jake wiped blood from his lip. "I'm not most beings." The guard laughed and moved forward again. This time, he was slower, more careful. He wanted to make the human suffer, not end things too quickly. His upper left arm swung in a wide arc, and Jake tried to duck under it. But Vorath's lower right arm was already coming up in a follow-up strike. The blow caught Jake in the stomach, lifting him off his feet. For a moment, he was airborne. Then he crashed down onto the arena floor, gasping for breath. The pain was incredible. He had never been hit so hard in his entire life. Up in the observation deck, Hannah gripped the railing with white knuckles. "Get up," she whispered. "Please, Jake, get up." Danny stood beside her, his face pale. "He can't survive this. No human can survive this." But Jake was already moving. He rolled onto his side, coughing and spitting blood. His ribs were cracked. He could feel them grinding against each other every time he breathed. But he planted his hands on the floor and pushed himself up anyway. Vorath stopped moving. He stared at the human with something that might have been confusion. "Why do you keep getting up? You cannot win. You must know that." Jake managed to straighten his back. Standing hurt. Breathing hurt. Everything hurt. But he was standing, because giving up is not an option, Jake said through gritted teeth. The guard shook his head. "Foolish. Very well. I will simply hit you harder." The next 5 minutes were a nightmare. Vorath attacked again and again, each blow more powerful than the last. Jake's left arm was dislocated when he tried to block a strike. His right eye swelled shut after a backhand caught him across the face. He could feel bones breaking inside him, could feel his body being destroyed piece by piece. Every single time he went down, he got back up. The Varelian crowd had stopped cheering. The clicking laughter had faded into confused silence. They had never seen anything like this. Every species in the galaxy had a breaking point. Every creature, when faced with enough pain, would eventually surrender. But this human refused to stay down. Vorath was breathing heavily now. Delivering such punishment was exhausting work. His attacks were becoming slower, less precise. He had expected this to be over in minutes. Instead, it had been 20 minutes, and the human was still standing. "What are you?" Vorath demanded. "What kind of creature feels such pain and keeps fighting?" Jake could barely see through his swollen eye. His vision was blurred with blood and tears. His legs shook with the effort of staying upright. But he managed to smile. "I am human," he said, "and humans do not break." Vorath roared in frustration and charged forward with all 4 arms raised. He was done playing with his prey. He would end this now, in one final devastating attack. Jake saw it coming, but could not move fast enough to dodge. He braced himself for the impact, knowing it might be the last thing he ever felt. But then something strange happened. As Vorath's arms came down, Jake's body moved on instinct. Thousands of years of evolution kicked in. The same survival instincts that had helped his ancestors survive. Ice ages and predators and countless other dangers took over. Jake twisted his body at the last possible moment. Vorath's blow glanced off his shoulder instead of hitting him directly. The guard stumbled forward, thrown off balance by his own momentum. And Jake, running on nothing but pure human stubbornness, grabbed one of Vorath's arms and pulled. The guard fell. The entire arena went completely silent. Even the High Counselor sat forward in his throne, eyes wide with disbelief. A human had thrown a coercive guard to the ground. Vorath scrambled back to his feet, his face twisted with rage and embarrassment. He looked at Jake with murder in his eyes. "You will pay for that." But before he could attack again, the High Counselor's voice echoed through the arena. "Enough." Vorath froze. He turned to look up at the High Counselor, confusion on his face. "The first trial is complete," the High Counselor announced. "The human has endured." The crowd erupted in murmurs and whispers. This was unprecedented. The first trial was supposed to be easy. The human should have been broken within minutes. Instead, he had survived for 20 minutes and had even managed to knock down the guard. Vorath stood there, humiliated and angry. He wanted to keep fighting. He wanted to crush the human into paste. But he could not disobey the High Counselor. "This is not over," Vorath growled at Jake as he walked past. "You got lucky. The others will finish what I started." Jake did not respond. He could not respond. The moment Vorath left the arena, his legs gave out. He collapsed onto his knees, gasping for breath. Blood dripped from a dozen wounds. His body was a map of bruises and broken bones. But he was alive. Up in the observation deck, Hannah was crying. Danny had his hands clasped together like he was praying. The other crew members stood in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. How did he do that? Danny whispered. How is he still alive? Hannah shook her head. She did not have an answer. But she knew one thing for certain. There were still 2 more trials to go. Jake knelt on the arena floor, trying to gather his strength. Every breath was agony. Every heartbeat sent waves of pain through his broken body. A medical scanner from somewhere above indicated that he had 4 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, internal bruising, and dozens of smaller injuries. Any other species would have surrendered by now. Any sensible being would have accepted death rather than face more punishment. But Jake Morrison was human. And humans were not sensible. They were stubborn. They were persistent. They refused to accept the impossible. He heard the massive door on the far side of the arena begin to open again. The second guard was coming. Jake planted his hands on the floor and pushed himself up. His body screamed in protest. His muscles burned. His bones ached. But inch by inch, he rose to his feet. He was not done yet. The second guard was different from Vorath. Where the first guard had been massive and powerful, this one was lean and quick. His name was Desek, and he moved like water flowing through the arena. Desek circled Jake slowly, studying him with calculating eyes. He had watched the first trial from a viewing room. He had seen how the human survived by simply refusing to fall. That strategy would not work against him. You are already broken, Desek said, his voice smooth and cold. Vorath cracked your ribs and damaged your organs. A smart creature would surrender now and accept death with dignity. Jake stood in the center of the arena, swaying slightly on his feet. His vision was still blurred. His breathing was shallow and painful. But he raised his fists anyway. I guess I'm not very smart, Jake replied. Desek smiled. It was not a friendly smile. No, you are not. But I will teach you the cost of stubbornness. The attack came so fast that Jake did not even see it. One moment, Desek was standing 5 feet away. The next moment, a precise strike hit Jake directly on his already injured ribs. The pain was blinding. Jake stumbled backward, clutching his chest. Desek did not give him time to recover. Another strike hit Jake's right knee, targeting the joint with surgical accuracy. Jake's leg buckled, and he almost fell. A third strike caught him in the kidney, and he tasted blood in his mouth. This guard was not trying to overpower Jake. He was taking him apart piece by piece. The Varelian crowd watched in fascination. This was a different kind of brutality than what Vorath had demonstrated. This was calculated destruction. Desek knew exactly where to hit a human body to cause maximum damage. Jake dropped to one knee, coughing blood. His body was failing him. The injuries from the first trial combined with these new attacks were pushing him beyond what any human should be able to endure. But somewhere deep inside him, something stirred. It was an ancient thing, buried in his very genes. The stubborn will to survive that had driven his ancestors across frozen wastelands. The determination that had pushed human explorers to cross vast oceans in tiny boats. The refusal to give up that had sent humans to the moon and then to the stars. Jake gritted his teeth and forced himself back to his feet. Desek paused, genuine surprise flickering across his face. Impressive, but meaningless. Your body is failing. I can hear your heartbeat becoming irregular. I can see your lungs struggling to expand. You are dying, human. Standing up will not change that. Maybe not, Jake said, his voice barely a whisper. But I will die on my feet. Desek attacked again. This time, he targeted Jake's arms, striking the muscles and tendons that allowed movement. Jake's left arm went numb. His right arm lost most of its strength. He could barely lift his fists anymore. Up in the observation deck, Hannah had stopped crying. Her face had gone pale and still. She was watching something that should have been impossible. A human being pushed far beyond normal limits and somehow still refusing to fall. "He's going to die," Danny said softly. "He's really going to die down there." Hannah did not respond. She could not take her eyes off Jake in the arena. Desek continued his methodical destruction. He hit Jake's other knee, making both legs unreliable. He struck pressure points that sent waves of agony through Jake's nervous system. He targeted organs that were already damaged, making the internal bleeding worse. And through it all, Jake stayed standing. He was not really fighting anymore. He could not block or dodge or strike back. He was simply standing there, taking punishment that would have killed most beings in the galaxy. His body was held together by nothing but willpower and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Desek was becoming frustrated. His breathing was heavy, and his movements were losing their precision. He had never fought an opponent like this. Every other being he had faced had eventually surrendered to the pain. They had begged for mercy or collapsed into unconsciousness. But this human just kept standing. "Why won't you fall?" Desek demanded, genuine confusion in his voice. "You cannot win. You cannot even fight back. What is the point of this suffering?" Jake looked at him through eyes that were nearly swollen shut. Blood covered his face and chest. His arms hung uselessly at his sides. But when he spoke, his voice was clear. "The point is that you haven't beaten me yet." Something happened in that moment. Something that the Varelians in the crowd would talk about for generations. Desek threw a powerful strike aimed directly at Jake's chest. It should have ended things. It should have stopped the human's heart. Instead, Jake moved. He did not dodge. He did not block. He simply stepped forward into the attack. Desek's blow glanced off his shoulder instead of hitting his chest. And Jake, using the very last of his strength, grabbed the guard's extended arm. He pulled Desek off balance. The guard stumbled forward, surprised by the human's sudden movement. Jake threw his weight against Desek, and for one impossible moment, the lean Varelian guard was falling. Desek hit the ground hard. The arena went silent again. Jake collapsed immediately afterward, landing on his hands and knees beside the fallen guard. He had nothing left. Every ounce of strength had been spent in that single desperate move. Desek scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with rage. He raised his arm to deliver a killing blow. "Enough!" The High Counselor's voice thundered through the arena. "The second trial is complete." Desek froze, his arm still raised. "He attacked me. He should be disqualified." "He defended himself," the High Counselor replied. "There is no rule against that. The trial is complete. The human has endured." The crowd began to murmur. What they were witnessing was unprecedented in the 3,000-year history of the trial of crushing. No being had ever survived 2 trials in such condition. No being had ever thrown 2 guards to the ground. Desek looked down at Jake with something that might have been fear. Then he turned and walked out of the arena without another word. Jake remained on his hands and knees, unable to rise. Blood pooled beneath him. His breathing was ragged and wet, suggesting fluid in his lungs. Medical scanners from above showed 17 broken bones, severe internal bleeding, and organ damage that would be fatal without treatment. But he was still conscious, still alive. "Someone help him!" Hannah screamed from the observation deck. "He needs medical attention." The High Counselor raised one hand. "The human has chosen to face the trials. He will receive no assistance until they are complete or until he surrenders." Jake heard these words. He heard Hannah crying above him. He heard the murmurs of the crowd. But all he could think about was the number 3.3 trials. He had survived 2. One more to go. With a groan of pure agony, Jake planted his hands on the blood-slicked floor and began to push himself up. His body screamed at him to stop. Every cell in his being begged for rest. But he kept pushing. It took almost a full minute, but Jake Morrison rose to his feet. The crowd fell absolutely silent. Even the High Counselor seemed at a loss for words. A single human, broken and bleeding, barely able to stand, was preparing to face the third and final trial. The massive door on the far side of the arena began to open once more. The third guard was a female Varelian named Kirith. She was smaller than the other two guards, standing only 7 feet tall. But there was something different about her. Something more dangerous. Kirith wore ceremonial armor made of black metal. On her chest was a symbol that Jake did not recognize, but the reaction from the crowd told him it was important. Varelians throughout the arena began to stand, showing respect to this warrior. The High Counselor's voice carried across the arena. Kirith is my personal guard. She has never lost a battle. She has killed 17 challengers in this very arena. Each of them was stronger than you, human. Jake looked at Kirith through his one working eye. He could barely see her. His vision was fading in and out, and the arena seemed to spin around him. But he could sense her power. This was not just a strong warrior. This was the best the Varelian Empire had to offer. Kirith walked slowly toward Jake. Unlike the other guards, she did not attack immediately. She stopped about 10 feet away and studied him with genuine curiosity. "You should be dead," she said. Her voice was deep and smooth, like stones in a river. "I watched both trials. Vareth hit you hard enough to shatter a Varelian's bones. Desek targeted every weakness in your body. Yet, you stand." Jake swayed on his feet. Speaking was difficult. Breathing was difficult. Everything was difficult. Still standing, Kirith tilted her head. "Your species is not impressive physically. Your skin is thin. Your bones are hollow compared to ours. Your muscles are weak. You cannot even regulate your own body temperature properly." She paused. "And yet, here you are. Broken, bleeding, dying. Still standing." "That's what humans do," Jake managed to say. "We keep going. Why?" Kirith asked. It was a genuine question, not a taunt. "What drives you to continue when logic says you should fall? What makes you endure such suffering?" Jake thought about his crew. He thought about Hannah and Danny and the 37 other people depending on him. He thought about Earth and his family and everyone who had ever believed in him. He thought about the stubborn spirit that had driven humanity from caves to cities to the stars. "Because someone has to," Jake said. "Because my crew needs me. Because giving up means letting everyone down." Kirith was silent for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She nodded with what looked like respect. "I understand," she said. "You fight for others, not for yourself. That is rare in any species." Then her expression hardened. "But my duty is to my empire. I cannot let you leave this arena alive. I hope you understand that." Jake raised his fists. They trembled badly, and he could barely feel his fingers. "Then do your duty. I'll do mine." Kirith attacked. She was faster than Vareth and more precise than Desek. Her strikes were devastating, each one calculated to cause maximum damage. But there was also something different about her approach. She was not trying to humiliate Jake or make him suffer unnecessarily. She was simply trying to end things as quickly and efficiently as possible. A blow to Jake's chest sent him stumbling backward. A kick to his leg made his already damaged knee buckle. A strike to his head made his vision go completely black for several seconds. Jake fell. This time, he stayed down longer than before. His body had reached its absolute limit. There was nothing left. Every muscle was exhausted. Every bone was broken or cracked. His organs were failing one by one. Up in the observation deck, Hannah was screaming. Danny had his hands over his face, unable to watch. The other crew members stood in horrified silence, witnessing their commander's death. Kira stood over Jake's prone body. "Stay down," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "You have proven yourself. No one will think less of you if you surrender now." Jake lay on the cold arena floor. Blood pooled around him. His breath came in short, painful gasps. He could feel his heart struggling to beat. And he thought about Earth. He thought about the blue skies and green forests. He thought about the oceans and mountains and deserts. He thought about the billions of people who called that small planet home. People who laughed and cried and loved and struggled every single day. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through strength or speed or superior technology. They had done it through sheer stubbornness, through the absolute refusal to accept defeat, through getting knocked down 100 times and getting up 101. Jake's fingers twitched against the floor. "No," he whispered. KY Wrath heard him. She stepped back, her eyes widening. Jake planted his hands on the floor. His arms shook violently. Blood dripped from his nose and mouth. But inch by inch, he pushed himself up. The crowd began to murmur. Then the murmurs became shouts. Then the shouts became something like fear. "Impossible," someone yelled. "He's already dead. His body cannot possibly function anymore." But Jake was standing. Somehow, impossibly, he was standing. Kira stared at him with an expression that combined horror and awe. "What are you?" Jake looked at her through eyes that could barely see. His body was nothing but pain. His mind was barely functional, but his spirit burned bright. "I am human," he said, "and I do not quit." Kireth attacked again. This time, she held nothing back. She struck Jake with enough force to crack the crystal walls of the arena. She hit him with combinations that would have killed any Varelian instantly, and Jake took it all. He did not dodge. He did not block. He simply stood there and endured. Every blow that would have destroyed another being, he absorbed. Every strike that should have ended his life, he survived. The arena fell silent. Even the High Counselor had risen from his throne, unable to believe what he was seeing. Kira stepped back, breathing heavily. Her fists were covered in Jake's blood. She had hit him at least 50 times in the last 3 minutes. Any other being in the galaxy would have been reduced to paste. But Jake Morrison was still standing. His body was a ruin. Both arms hung broken at his sides. His face was swollen beyond recognition. Blood covered every inch of him. He should not have been alive, let alone conscious. But his eyes were open. And in those eyes burned something that Kireth had never seen before. Something that made her, the greatest warrior in the Varelian Empire, take a step back in fear. That it was the indomitable human spirit. The thing that could not be crushed, no matter how hard the universe tried. The fire that burned in every human being since the very first one, stood upright on an ancient savanna and decided to keep walking. Kireth turned to face the High Counselor. She raised her bloodied fists in the air. "I cannot break him," she announced. Her voice carried across the silent arena. "This human is beyond breaking." The High Counselor stared at Jake with an expression that was impossible to read. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then the most powerful being in the Varelian Empire slowly descended from his throne and walked into the arena. The High Counselor walked across the arena floor slowly. His forearms hung at his sides. His black scales gleamed under the bright lights. Every Varelian in the crowd held their breath. He stopped directly in front of Jake Morrison. Up close, Jake could see just how massive the High Counselor truly was. The alien leader towered over him by nearly 4 feet. His red eyes glowed with an inner light that seemed to pierce through Jake's very soul. But Jake did not look away. He could not bow even if he wanted to. His broken body simply would not allow it. So he stood there, swaying on ruined legs, and met the High Counselor's gaze. In 3,000 years of the trial of crushing, the High Counselor said slowly, no being has ever endured all 3 guards. Jake did not respond. He was not sure he could. Speaking required energy that he no longer had. Many warriors stronger than you have entered this arena. Champions from a dozen worlds. Beings with armor-plated skin and muscles like steel cables. Creatures bred specifically for combat. The High Counselor paused. All of them broke. All of them fell. All of them eventually surrendered to the pain. The crowd remained absolutely silent. This was history being made. Every Varelian knew it. You are not stronger than them, the High Counselor continued. You are not faster. You have no natural armor, no claws, no special abilities. By every measure, you should have been the easiest opponent these guards have ever faced. He leaned closer, studying Jake's ruined face with intense curiosity. And yet here you stand, broken in ways I did not know were possible. Bleeding from wounds that should have killed you hours ago. Your body is failing. Your organs are shutting down. You will likely die within the hour without medical treatment. Jake managed to nod slightly. He knew all of this. He could feel his life slipping away with every heartbeat. So I must ask you one final question, human. The High Counselor's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Why? Why did you not surrender? Why did you choose to suffer so greatly? Jake thought about his answer. He thought about all the things he could say. He could talk about duty and honor and responsibility. He could speak about his crew and their lives. He could mention Earth and humanity and the stubborn spirit that defined his species. But in the end, he chose the simplest truth. Because surrender was never an option, Jake said. His voice was barely a whisper, but somehow it carried across the entire arena. Humans do not quit. We do not accept defeat. We keep fighting until we win or until we die. That is who we are. The High Counselor stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he did something that no one in the arena expected. He raised all 4 of his arms above his head in the Varelian gesture of ultimate respect. The trial of crushing has reached its verdict, the High Counselor announced, his voice booming through the arena. This human has proven his innocence through endurance beyond anything we have ever witnessed. The charges against Earth's delegation are dismissed. A wave of sound rolled through the crowd. Some Varelians cheered. Others murmured in disbelief. Many simply sat in stunned silence. Up in the observation deck, Hannah collapsed against the railing, sobbing with relief. Danny pumped his fists in the air, tears streaming down his face. The other crew members embraced each other, laughing and crying at the same time. But the High Counselor was not finished. More than that, he continued. This human has earned the respect of the Varelian Empire. We have encountered many species in our travels across the galaxy. Species stronger than humans. Species faster than humans. Species with technologies far beyond anything Earth has developed. He looked directly at Jake, and there was something new in his red eyes. Something that looked almost like admiration. But we have never encountered a species with such capacity for endurance. Such stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Such an indomitable will to survive. He paused. I understand now why the older races speak of humanity with caution. You are not a threat because of your weapons or your numbers. You are a threat because you cannot be broken. The High Counselor turned to address the crowd. From this day forward, the Varelian Empire extends the hand of alliance to Earth. Any enemy of humanity is an enemy of the Varelians. Any friend of humanity is a friend to us. The crowd erupted. Thousands of Varelians rose to their feet, clicking and shouting in approval. Whatever hostility they had felt toward humans was gone, replaced by a deep and genuine respect. Jake heard all of this through a haze of pain and exhaustion. His vision was fading rapidly. His legs finally gave out, and he began to fall. Strong hands caught him before he hit the ground. Jake looked up to see Kirith holding him gently, keeping him from collapsing. "You are the bravest warrior I have ever faced," she said quietly. "It has been an honor." Then everything went black. Jake woke up 3 days later in the medical bay of the horizon. Hannah was sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. When she saw his eyes open, she burst into tears. "You're alive," she said. "The doctors weren't sure you would make it. You had so many injuries that they didn't know where to start." Jake tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Hannah quickly gave him some water. "The crew?" He managed to ask. "Everyone is safe. The Varelians released us immediately after the trial. They even gave us supplies and fuel for free." Hannah shook her head in amazement. "Jake, you have no idea what you did down there. The entire galaxy is talking about it." Danny appeared in the doorway, grinning from ear to ear. "Commander, you're awake. Great, because you have about 100 messages from Earth. The President wants to give you a medal. Several other alien species have requested meetings. And the Varelian High Counselor sent a personal message thanking you for teaching his people about human endurance." Jake closed his eyes, overwhelmed. He had just wanted to save his crew. He had not expected to change the galaxy's perception of humanity, but that was exactly what had happened. News of the trial of crushing spread across the stars. Species that had dismissed humans as weak and fragile began to look at them differently. The story of the soft-skinned creature who had endured 3 elite guards became legendary, and in the years that followed, whenever someone underestimated humanity, whenever an alien species thought they could bully or threaten or break the people of Earth, they were reminded of Jake Morrison. They were reminded that humans do not break. They were reminded that you can beat a human, burn them, damage them in 100 different ways, but you can never, ever make them quit. Jake spent 2 months recovering from his injuries. He received medals and honors from Earth and from a dozen alien governments. He was promoted to admiral and given command of an entire fleet. But when people asked him about the trial of crushing, he always gave the same answer. "I didn't do anything special," he would say. "I just refused to give up." That's what humans do. That's who we are. And somewhere in the Varelian Empire, in an arena made of crystal that still bore cracks from that legendary battle, a small monument stood. It was made of black Varelian stone, and it bore a simple inscription in 100 different languages. Here stood Jake Morrison of Earth. Here the galaxy learned what humanity truly is. It was a lesson they would never forget.